how do I get through this challenging moment of crises and a lot of things putting me under pressure or putting my existence under pressure? Gas prices, electricity prices going up, job insecurity, war situations. And especially if you've trained your empathy, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and you take everything in and your radar is out there and you're constantly, oh my God, yeah, where am I in this context? And am I good to myself? Do I appreciate myself? Do I take care of my mental health? Do I take care of my physical and my spiritual well-being?
How do we navigate complex times? What are the inner resources that we can find to better come out of a crisis? This is Emma. I'm a guide for yoga, breathwork, meditation, and this podcast is part of my effort to help people create and live a more luminous life. My guest today had a time in his life when he was homeless, and school, mentors, and his own internal guidance is what put him back on track. He's a futurist with a pragmatic, with a structured view, but at heart, he's an artist. I met him at the Future.io executive conference in Aix-en-Provence, and he was one of the people who had the most impact on me. The conversations that we had were the reason why I even wanted to start a podcast in the first place. Growing up between cultures from Europe, Asia to USA has given Pascal a unique perspective early on. The perspective that to embrace fundamental transformation starts with oneself. He has a story of personal reinvention, lifelong curiosity, and professional business career. Pascal Morgan is a technology pioneer, creative thinker, and passionate speaker. He's a digital transformation advisor, and he looks back at over 30 years of career in technology and media. He's the founder of think.speak.transform, where he connects, advises, and speaks on disruptive technologies, new business models, as well as ethical challenges for a sustainable future. This includes guiding startups, companies, and corporations through times of constant change. He's an artist and philosopher at heart. He studied philosophy in Frankfurt and has been trained in choreography. He loves coffee, gadgets, and people. And while his 30-year career is absolutely impressive and remarkable, I'm here to find out more and learn more from the human behind. His first contact to the deeper side of human life was when he was 15. He's going to share all about it in our conversation today. We're going to speak about navigating complexity and finding inner balance, inner worth in times of crisis. I welcome today Pascal Morgan. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And welcome, Pascal. I'm so grateful to have you here today as my guest. How are you today? How are you feeling?
Well, first of all, Emma, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the invitation. And it feels good to be here. Feels very good to be here. And it's a great way to start the day.
Likewise, Pascal, when I met you in France, in Aix-en-Provence, in the Future.io conference, you were one of the people who had the most impact on me. And I remember that even though we were in a business setting, speaking and thinking about work and the future and pragmatic things, what really had an impact on me was our dinner conversation, our white dinner conversation, actually, when we spoke about meditation, when we spoke about human transformation. And I remember listening to you and being like, I want to record what you are saying right now and put it out there for people to hear. So it makes me really humble and grateful that you're here today. And maybe just to get the conversation flowing, could you share a bit, what is something that challenges you in this time, and what is something that you feel grateful for in this time?
Oh, thank you. Well, actually, two very big and two wonderful questions, actually, that go very deep. So, first of all, if I may just link back to that evening when we met, it was a moment of serendipity for me. So, having this moment in a business context where everybody is talking about the future and about transformation and a lot of technology and how this will change society And that's what I usually do. I talk about these kind of complexities of what's happening around us. Then to have this moment, this pocket in time where we can just be there at a dinner table and have a moment of presence. And that was such a rich moment because it was a moment without beginning, without end. It was just there. And and that's what I think is so important today. And it is a big challenge. I'm not saying this is easy. Yeah, it's not even easy for me. In a moment of a lot of noise and a lot of different challenges, too much input, information overload, different agendas, um, is creating that space of presence, natural, pure presence, not wanting to achieve anything, not wanting to model anything, manipulate anything, just being there. And that moment for me reflects taking this moment of just being human and having that moment of a real connection. And that's what I was very grateful for in that evening. That you went on this moment journey, kind of presence, and I think that is something that I'm very passionate about. To bring that more into the outside world is to have those invitations to others who are constantly in this kind of hype cycle. You know? It's always something mind, 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 or even too much worries and sorrows and looking back, or too much thinking about only tomorrow, but not taking care of our moment in presence.
So true. And what I love from what I hear is that your work deals with technology, with the future, with AI, and as I was saying, very pragmatic things. But the way you approach that is a very soulful one, it's a very deep one, and presence oriented one. What is something meaningful that you're working on right now, these days?
A
lot of things, I bet.
Well, yes and no. Um, I think I think it's a constant challenge
Mm,
every day to wake up and to make this a meaningful day. Yeah. And not only I read a lot, I connect a lot, I talk a lot. That's my job. I love speaking,
mm,
and that's why I call my company Think, Speak, Transform, exactly for those reasons, because I just love to think and reflect, and I enjoy complexity. But it's also the speaking thing that creates the connection. And in those connections, new things evolve, right? There are different positions, there are different perspectives. I'm the classic debater. I don't know if you're familiar with the MBTI, 16 personalities.
yeah,
I just love discussing things from different perspectives.
what's your type?
I sometimes, I am the debater. I'm the
Debater.
ENTP.
Okay, great.
So that's the person who just really loves, I even love to challenge myself. So I can like, even in my mind, when I have conversations with myself or with others, I like to sometimes debate against me or myself,
Hmm.
just to challenge me, just to understand, where am I at? Because um, I've I do feel very immune to certain bias traps. I mean,
Mm,
everybody is biased. Everybody has
of
this thing. The
course.
moment you have ego, you have things that you use, patterns that you use to look at the world. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's always going to carry some bias. You just have to be very observant of that and try to stay free of it as good as you can. But um, yeah, to actually answer your question, it's a day, every day, it's a challenge to do something that is meaningful and to always, for me, to look at what I'm doing. Is this creating impact? Is this creating progress? Am I just fulfilling some old patterns? Am I trying to close some old holes or satisfy some needs?
Mm.
Or is it really something that is nourishing, that is good for me, that is creating value in my presence? Yeah. And so just a word on where I come from, because you mentioned that. So in after I finished school, or while I was actually finishing school, my Abitur, that's grade A level equivalent. So after 13 school years, I was actually in parallel studying choreography and dance. So I thought I was going to be an artist and a dancer. And I thought, okay, but I still want to go to university. I did do the entry test at the University of Dance in Frankfurt. I got admitted, but I did want to finish my school. So I then continued my education with a private school and then continued my Abitur, my A level degree. And then after that, I thought, like, what is the best combination as an artist and as a dancer and choreographer? And then I started doing the music for my performances. I wanted to study philosophy.
Mm.
Yeah. So actually, I think the two professions that don't really bring that much money in as a salary and are very tough to survive with. Those are the two things that I chose, but those were the things that drove me. Um, and by coincidence, then I got into digital and IT and technology, and that was exactly actually 30 years ago. And everything else is history. Um, but it's always this thing about I have a very strong story of transformation, of personal transformation, different life phases, different things I went through, and and I noticed the only way I can deal with it is just to be honest. Yeah, it's just to be very frank and honest about it, and to face it, to face my inner demons, to face my outer demons, and um, and I think that's the source of some of the resilience that carries me still today. But don't get me wrong, it's not easy. Yeah. Um, but we'll get into to that in a second. There's maybe one or two things I can share with you, talking about how do you ride your demons
I
in
love
a
that.
good way.
I love that. And maybe you can maybe help us travel with you a bit through your life story, just to get a bit of a perspective of how you got to include these concepts in your life, and what are the, let's say, the life moments when you came closer to some of the values who
Mm,
have built who you are today.
mm, mm. Well, again, first of all, thank you very much for that question. And it's a very meaningful conversation and it resonates very much with me. So I really appreciate that.
Mm.
Uh, so, from my life story, very simply, just in a few steps, I grew up in a very challenging household. So, my father, as an African American in the military, so he was a military man for 24 years, has had war experience in Korea, and also represents a very strong and um, for me, also nourishing African American family community I have in the States.
Mm.
But of course, he was a very powerful figure in my life, as he was the typical macho. Yeah.
Uh,
Very, very rigid and very strong and powerful. When he was in Korea, he did his fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo. And that's what he wanted to do with me as well. So when I was 5.5, 6 years old, I was in this Taekwondo school. So we were lined up, all the grown-ups, and then there were two children at the end, and I was one of the two. And I had to learn at a very early age the thing around discipline, physical discipline,
mm.
and a quite kind of a strictness to it. And he was also very rigid, physically rigid, and also partially toxic. So that's where I had my first exposure to toxic masculinity. So as I say that I love my father, and he has a lot of attributes that I can take. I can also see some of the things he gave me as a challenge that I need to free myself from as well. Yeah, I cannot continue that story. I have to write my own story. Also, as a man, find my own identity. Yeah, and I don't want to continue any toxicity. Yeah.
Mm.
That's on one side. And on the other side, my mother, an intellectual, feminist, politically very active, social democrat in Germany, did her PhD in history, specialized on the National Socialism and the workers' movement and the women's liberation. So, in that context, she was a complete free thinker, very agnostic. She unfortunately died uh, uh, 25 years ago. Yes.
Mm.
Way too young, because she was actually in the beginning of a very promising political career. But she gave me this free thinking perspective, and anything is possible. And what she would do, once a week, there was a newspaper she subscribed to. And once a week, there was a science page, and she would always tear that out and bring it to me.
Mm.
And I would read that. And then when I was 12 and 13, I would start debating political issues with her. And the beginning of the workers' movement, and then the beginning of the women's movement, women's liberation, ever since Olympe de Gouges, 1792, 93, with the Declaration of Women's Rights. And it's, and that's the dichotomy, or the, let's say, the field of tension that I grew up in. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, traveling through cultures. So I was born in Germany, then we moved to Thailand, from Thailand to California, from California, then back to Germany. And we were only in transit here. We wanted to continue to Sri Lanka.
Mm.
And we got stuck here in Germany. So in that kind of tension at home, and then having two much younger siblings, where I had the responsibility for them as well, so 10 and 12 years younger than me. And then at the same time, growing up between cultures, I constantly had this challenge of adapting, readapting, learning as quickly as possible, letting go again. Yeah. And then try to find my own golden thread through this whole chaos, actually. So yes, I've been on 10, if I'm very accurate, 11 different schools to graduate from school. That's without kindergarten and without university. So in that sense, I had to quickly adapt, and it wasn't always a positive challenge. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is so, it must have been really tough for a young child to be moved so much, to experience so much instability, right?
Yes.
Was it something that was there as a stable point for you, or was it something that you managed to find as a grounding point for yourself in those moments?
Yes. So I think from a very personal perspective, and I'm not looking at the outside moments.
Mm-hmm.
We can also talk about that a bit later. Outside moments, people that play a specific role, mentors, even without knowing that they're there. That's very important. But from my inner perspective and my inner journey, there were some key moments. One very special moment. There was, I don't know if you recall the old audio tapes. And when I was 15, there was a mother of a classmate of mine. She gave me this audio tape. And at the time, we're talking the 80s. At the time, you had these very old, it's very simple plastic encased cassette recorders with these long buttons that you have to push down. They snap in, and then the lid will flop open, and you have to slide this cassette in, and then you push the lid down, and it snaps in. And I had these very cheap headphones, with these very cheap cushions that you put on your ears. And I remember it was an evening. I was at home. So she gave that to her son. He brought it to me because he told her that I was into philosophy, and and I was thinking a lot in class and discussing a lot. And I remember it was an evening at home. It was, I think it was a winter evening. It was already dark outside. And I put on my headphones and I pushed the play button. And I'll never forget that. It's like I get goosebumps now. And I pushed the button and I heard something that I've never heard before in my life. It was like an explosion in my head and in my whole body, actually. It was a tape from Osho, at the time Bhagwan, and he was holding a speech. I think it was around. I think it was about the whole thing around philosophy, Zen, and of course he never really spoke so directly about it, but also some of the tantric elements that was part of his philosophy.
Mm.
But he was just mind opening for me. And that was a very strong key moment. And I just sat there mesmerized, and I listened to the tape, and that has been with me ever since. Ever since, deeply ingrained in my experience as an adolescent with 15, and I'm very grateful for that, because I experienced this inner moment that I think gave me the resilience for some of the challenges that were just right around the corner. So when I was 16, my family more or less imploded. It was a very violent, very disruptive divorce and split situation where my parents split up. They were kidnapping my siblings from each other. Um, there was a lot of violence involved, and it was very traumatic. So with 16, I was homeless. Uh, so my mother moved away, my father moved away, my siblings were gone, the house was sold, and I was in a large German city, in Frankfurt, and I had no place to go. And so I had to improvise. And I, you know, improvised at friends' places. I slept outside. I went to these, what you have in Germany, these small garden houses. So you have these little garden colonies. And sometimes I would find a little house that didn't have a big lock, and I would maybe break in and then have a night there.
Mm.
Um, so that was a time where I really had to, where I was really struggling. Yeah. I left school and I had to improvise for several months. And I think that continued actually for about, yeah, a good 6, 7 months, and then off and on. And then I landed in some flats, some squatted flats,
Mhm.
abandoned apartments. Um, then it got into a community. And I didn't know what happened, but that was like the year of 84. That's my big transformational year.
Mm.
And also with the help of some mentors, then I got back into the school system. And then from that school system, then I got into a place where adolescents were being taken care of, yeah, into a home, um, where there were 20, 25 other adolescents from all walks of life. For me, I was very exotic there because all of these other youths, they had some very, very tough challenges. They were drug addicts, yes, kids that, already had started very early on in their criminal careers, and also some sad parts, prostitution, these things. So me coming there from that background and then going to school every morning, I was very exotic in that context. But to close the circle, that moment where I had heard that Osho tape for the very first time, that triggered off a whole thread of a spiritual anchoring, yeah, that would then carry me through a lot of the very hard challenges that would, that were coming. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this amazingly vulnerable story. I think many of those listening are thinking about or anticipating or thinking about how they could maybe navigate some challenge, some crisis in their life. But I think the prospect of actually getting into or being out on the street, left without a home, is something that many of us maybe don't even imagine for ourselves. So to have been in that position, which is a very vulnerable one, and to be here today, I personally, when I hear that, I feel amazed and grateful, and I feel like the angels were there to protect you, to guide you, and there was something there clearly to have prepared you for that. And I'm curious, and it makes me really wonder how did it come that you didn't have an internal crisis after that external crisis, right? So
I never said I didn't have an internal crisis.
okay,
No,
how did it look like?
but no, it's, I love sharing my story to whoever is interested. And everybody has a story to share. I mean, everybody has
Mm,
crisis, and I would never try to compare my story with others. And I always have the feeling it keeps me humble to know how deep my crisis went,
mhm.
to actually understand how deep it can be for somebody else, even if we sometimes, from a bias, think, oh, this person is privileged, it can't be that tough. Yeah. Everybody has their own stories, everybody has their own demons, and everybody has a challenge in this lifetime that we have on this planet, yeah, this very short lifetime, to process things. It's like, for me, I see it like a challenge to say, okay, what is my challenge for this life here? What am I here to learn? What am I
Yeah,
here to process? Which path am I to evolve through?
yeah,
And I know this is a very privileged discussion because there are a lot of people out there that are struggling. They're trying to get by every day,
yeah,
physically, mentally, spiritually. It's very, very, very diverse and very different. Um, but I feel free. I feel free to share that,
mhm,
and also to be vulnerable, because that's the only way I think we can be. And just to share one little anecdote, it's I have that sometimes, especially in the autumn time when the air gets a little bit fresher, a little bit colder, and a little bit moister. And I just go outside into the park, or I walk down the street, and I can get this moment where I can smell this crispness in the air. This it's slightly cold, but I feel extremely naked. And it reminds me of this moment of being homeless, of being exposed to nature, because I only had the clothes I had with
mm,
me. I had a small pouch, and I just had some extras and nothing else. And then being exposed to a very cold night, or especially in the early morning hours when the dew sets in and your clothes get moist, and they stick to you, and there's like this freezing feeling that you can't get out of your fingers and your feet. But there is something very naked to it, something very pure. And I can sense that, every now and then I can just close my eyes, and I can feel it now too.
rawness maybe.
It's yeah, absolutely raw. And there's a beauty in that moment. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to sugarcoat something. I'm not trying to say it's beautiful to be in a crisis, but I appreciate the nakedness of a pure moment. Yeah. And that's I think what gives me a certain level of detachment to certain challenges where I say, okay, I can go completely into a moment and say, I need to solve a problem. I need to focus all my chi and my energy. And, what I've talked about, the discipline from my dad, I can focus and I can get this done.
Military style.
But exactly. But I can also there is something in me that is detached from that. Yeah. And that's that moment, this pureness that I can appreciate.
Mm. I definitely felt that. I definitely felt it. Pascal, so a lot of people today are anticipating crisis in their life, or maybe even going through crisis. How do we how do we manage this? How do we, I don't know, listen to the news and hear about the war, hear about the financial crisis that's coming upon, and manage to not create an internal crisis, not manage to not go into that space of survive, but stay in that space of thrive, let's say. Can we hope to thrive in these times? And when I think about philosophy, mm, or an objection that I think could be there is that in times of crisis, philosophy comes second. That is an objection that I've heard, that in times of crisis, there's no time. You have to act. You don't have time to. But my personal opinion is that is the other way around. In times of crisis, we can turn to thinking, and thinking transforms something in us. Can you share a bit about this? Maybe some of your own wisdom and experience.
Wow. Very well put, Emma. I'm learning from you, just listening and taking this moment in. And it's wonderfully said. It's wonderfully said, and I couldn't agree more. Uh, Crisis has always been as painful and as critical as crisis can be. Has always been the beginning of something new. And not that I misunderstood. I'm not saying crisis is good. The war in Ukraine is not good. Yeah. Hunger, oppression, abuse is not good. Yeah. And I understand it's sometimes hard to filter out all that what's coming in. And I know a lot of friends in my meditation community and my spiritual community, they sometimes tend to then to negate everything and to say it's all fake or just to, and I understand where they're coming from. I'm way too much into science and into the real world to really capsule myself off and to call everything it's just fake. There's a big difference between understanding my own life as like a stage
Mm-hmm.
and observing and seeing how these things play out and what they do with me and what I can learn from that. There's a difference between understanding that on one side and on the other side, negating everything what's happening out there. So that's why I do feel very immune towards, for instance, conspiracy narratives or esoteric concepts that might lead us away into another construction. Actually, yeah, it's just
Yeah,
you're replacing one construct with another construct.
I totally resonate.
And there's this thing about, okay, wait a second, wait. Where am I? Where am I in this moment? A lot of people do it over breathing, over connecting, over introspection. Things that I do, for instance, I mean, I meditate every morning. I have to start my day. If I don't have that moment, then something's off for the day. So I begin every morning with physical exercise with it's a mix out of um, physical awareness, breathing, yoga, and then also fitness, and weaving these things in. But then there's also a moment of meditation, and there are different meditation techniques out there. You have passive meditation, active meditation, and all kinds of different things. I have some favorites that I like to do. But everybody should find their own style and their own model that suits them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's this, what I'm trying to say is this: how do I get through this challenging moment of crises and a lot of things putting me under pressure, or putting my existence under pressure? Gas prices, electricity prices going up, job insecurity, war situations. And especially if you've trained your empathy, yeah,
Oh yeah.
and you take everything in, and your radar is out there, and you're constantly, oh my God, yeah. Um, but it's, where am I? Where am I in this context? And am I good to myself? Do I appreciate myself? Yeah. Do I look at my hand or my body? Do I touch it? Do I appreciate it? Yeah. Is it blessed? Yeah. Do I take care of my mental health? Do I take care of my physical and my spiritual well-being? And that is something that doesn't come by itself. It needs to be practiced. Appreciation needs to be practiced. Yeah. It's the same thing like connecting. Yeah.
Sure, yes.
Calling people you're connected to, and calling them and saying, how are you? Yeah. Looking out after each other. There's some doing that needs to be done, taken care of, right? So what I've learned in my practice, for instance, so I like working a lot, for instance, with chakras. Yeah. And I know I talked a lot that I'm a science person and I love science. But I also appreciate ancient wisdom. And if you take a look at, there's a lot of science in a historical cultural context, yeah, that can be appreciated. And I would never, for instance, take something historically out of context, something that's maybe 2, 3, even 5,000 years old, and try to proclaim that this is the truth of today's scientific reality. I would never do that. But we can still appreciate. We can still, yes, appreciate this ancient wisdom, and chakras have, for me, been very useful. And even if we don't want to work with chakras, I think it's always worth looking at what they represent. Yeah, and because they represent different aspects of it. Yeah, and for those of you, I know that you are also familiar with the 7 chakras that we have. And if I start root chakra, yeah, at the very bottom, and go all the way up, it's a very clear narrative. Yeah, it's like, I am, I feel, I want, I love, I speak, express, I see, I pray. And these are very interesting dimensions in our life, in the time that we have here. Yeah. And if I start with I am in my root chakra, it's about existing. It's one of the most challenging questions for me, especially the thing about, I'm allowed to be here. Yeah. I'm allowed to exist. Nobody can say I'm not allowed to exist. And there, a lot of, it's what I call the super ego. That's what I also learned, the voices coming up and talking to this ear or talking to this ear. Sometimes it's the voices of your parents. Sometimes it's your own internalized voices. It's the voice that actually tries to keep you in the small boundary. Yeah. And the funny thing is, it's a very negative voice. But actually, the voice is trying to do good. It's trying to protect you from
help you survive.
additional trauma. Yeah, it's trying to tell you how to survive. Yeah, try to protect you. Don't get hurt.
And I feel like in times of crisis, all the energy goes down to the root chakra, right? So all the energy starts to focus on saving money, on surviving, on preserving our physical integrity, let's say. But as you were sharing, the journey of the energy through the chakras makes us a whole being, makes us a human being. So if you wonder, or if one wonders, what is the value of compassion, of pleasure, of wanting, and of praying, of seeing in times of crisis? And to that, I would say you don't want your energy to be stuck at the base. You don't want to be stuck in survival, even if everything points to that. But you would want to to ensure that, you would want to secure that. And after that, allow the energy to go up so you can have a tall spine, as we say in yoga school, be with a strong spine and a soft heart, right? So how about staying
Absolutely.
complex human beings and integrated human beings, right? And I feel this is where thinking
Mhm.
and philosophy and concepts and even prayer, meditation, working with our bodies, this is where it comes in. The closer to survival that you get, one may feel like, how can you go and tell people to do yoga when the world is collapsing, right? But precisely because the world is collapsing, we need to have these practices to be grounded, to have our inner resources. At least that's how I'm seeing it, and this is
Mm.
also why I love the way you bring philosophy into and prayer and meditation into your own internal crisis, and not only.
Um, so, so when I speak about the root chakra and speak about being and existing, the root chakra is not it's not for no reason why it's one of the most powerful chakras there. It's the source of the energy that will go up. Um, but every chakra has a light and a shadow side. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's interesting to look into those and to explore those. And that is something that doesn't happen by itself. It's sometimes a painful process. Yeah. It's what I call turning on my flashlight, my inner flashlight,
Mm.
and looking into those dark corners, right? And exploring and seeing like, oh my God. Yeah. So like, for instance, there's a lot of trauma in the root chakra. Talk about, okay, people telling you that you're not worthy of being here,
Mm.
or people experiencing being given away, for adoption. People not getting enough love and attention from your parents, and having the feeling that you actually should not be there. Yeah, you're just a burden. Yeah, and these kind of experiences as a child, they run very deep. So this is basic psychology even, yeah, not even spiritual. It is something very tangible. You can feel it. Yeah? And when you work with people or you coach people, you can really sense the moment you say, you're allowed to be here. It's great that you're here. And I've
Mm.
seen tears, I've seen relaxation, I've seen,
Mm.
it's this moment of arriving, and that shows you how powerful this is. But if you just go up the chakras, it's also similar with others, with your second, that, the one that you connect with, the one that you actually love with. Yeah, because a lot of people, they misunderstand what the second chakra and the fourth actually mean. Yeah. When we go into relationships, when we want to be reflected as men, women, or whatever gender you identify with, when we are connecting, we want to be seen. Yeah, this is a lot. There's a lot of, that's the light. There's a lot of, in the dark shadow, there's this stickiness, yeah, of not being recognized and not being loved back. Yeah,
Mm.
not being able to let go. Yeah,
Mm.
sexual satisfaction. Yeah, it's this constant being confirmed. Yeah, being confirmed that I'm worth something, that I'm beautiful. Yeah, and that I get my self-worth out of that. Yeah, there's a lot you can look at right there. And then you go up to the next and you say, okay, my third, I want. It's the expression of my willpower. Yeah, it's like, but how do I create borders? Yeah, how can I feel agency? Yeah, how can I feel empowered that I can really reach out into the world out there and say, this is how I want to design the world. This is the expression of things. Or am I holding myself back?
I even
Yeah,
feel like
can I really
straightening my,
shine?
as you speak, I feel like straightening my back, just the fire, rising you up.
Yes, yes, and a lot of energy and a lot of the experience that I had is a lot of celebration, yeah, in the third chakra, yeah, this solar plexus. It's a lot of yes, yeah. And then the funny thing is, and I just move up into my heart, and then it's something. This was my most transformative moment, and that's why in ancient wisdom they call the heart chakra the transformational chakra that actually connects the lower ones and the upper ones and can transform energy. And also, when you're stuck in one of those or you're in the shadow moment, you can actually then connect it with your heart, and it will transform a lot. My experience here, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but my experience was a lot of this unconditional love. What does it mean to love unconditionally? And interestingly, I was surprised when my first experiences with that. I thought this was going to be, oh, I love the world and I feel connected to the world and everything. And so, these pink heart moments, and and sticky, sticky, sticky. That was second chakra. That was second chakra. Yeah, that wasn't up here. That wasn't this. It's a very calm, almost cool kind of feeling. It's
Mhm.
like it's just unconditionally bringing in and letting it go and being okay with it. And being okay, and honestly being
Yeah.
okay with myself. Oh my God. that
Oh
was a
yeah.
big challenge. Yeah,
Wow.
being okay with myself, loving myself unconditionally. It's one of the biggest challenges. Yeah.
When did you
Ah,
first start to feel that you accept yourself and love yourself unconditionally? If you remember, was there a moment? Was there a time?
so wow. It's hmm. I think there have always been moments in my life. Um, I remember talking about vulnerability when I was, I think, 8.5 years old, uh, dancing naked in front of the closet of my parents. I was alone at home, and my parents had a closet in their room and a big mirror. And I was a little bit chubby. I wasn't the skinniest kid
Hmm.
at that time. Even though my dad tried to train me a lot, but I ate a lot. But I remember a moment where I just loved myself and I loved my body and I loved how everything on my body was shaking in front of the mirror and I was dancing and dancing and I was ecstatic. I love that moment. I love that moment. And I think that's something that I also learned from my kids is this thing of appreciating the moment of being without all this noise and all these voices. Yeah. It's being okay with myself. Yeah. I don't want to simplify the answer too much. I had, I think, the first big moment when I went through my latest, over the last few years, my latest education cycle, going through different spiritual meditation and also tantric practices, and to have like an inner experience and to look at these different chakras and moments. And so I think there's a whole chain of little events Yeah.
Mhm.
Getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that is, I think, the whole story about awakening. I always thought that awakening was a done deal. You have to just work to it. And then all of a sudden you have this epiphany. And then you're like, oh, wow, I know it all. And I'm fine. I'm free. And I'm happy forever.
But
And exactly. I think I missed out something. And there's something that comes from behind and says, well, have you dealt with your inner father? Have you dealt with your inner mother? Who are you as a man? Where are you in this society? And all of a sudden, pattern here, pattern there. And then, wait a second, I thought things were clear now. Yeah. I thought, I just have to sit on my cushion and stare at my belly button for like several years and then I'm good. No, it's a constant. I had this conversation the other day about, this U shape in your
oh yeah.
process of awakening, and then having these different stations, and then always looping back, and and then all of a sudden you think you're very far in something, and then something completely mundane happens, and you get all upset, and all of a sudden you go like, oh, wait a second, I'm in a pattern right now. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm in this
yeah,
moment. I'm in these old jukeboxes with these little records,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I just
Playing
push the
over and
button,
over.
and then this arm gets the little record out, puts it on there. The tone arm moves over, the needle sits down, and the record starts playing. And all you can do is watch, and you can't stop it.
Mm,
That's a pattern. That's a pattern where all of a sudden this jukebox starts, and it starts playing if you
mm.
like it or not. Yeah. So, like, screw your enlightenment. Yeah. I've got you now. And you're going to listen to this record until it's finished. Yeah. And then when it's finished, then sit down, meditate about it, and ask yourself, why did that happen? What just happened now? Yeah. Talk to your inner observer. Yeah. And try to learn. It's so.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, like, and I feel like this is so encouraging for anyone who wants to go or who is already on a path of self-development. It never stops, right? Like you meditate, you've been through your journey, you've been through everything, and you now have kids, and the kids get sick and they cry, and then you have to record a podcast with me, but everything is messed up, so you have to you come downstairs and
That was the story of my morning.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
took the liberty
Yeah.
to share that because I just felt like it's so I don't know, speaking about it's so telling to how you still have challenges, right? And how we still have challenges. Like many people think that I just because I teach meditation and I practice meditation, I'm this person who never gets angry. Well, ask my boyfriend. Right? I mean, I'm a human being. Everyone is a human being. We have emotions. We are allowed to have
Yes.
emotions. Anger is actually sometimes, or can be a good thing, moving us through something and away from something that we don't want. So, and we see a pattern. When we see a pattern, I feel like the power is there to observe. To observe, as you said, you watch the record. You cannot stop it in the moment, but then you can reflect about it, and that's where our power
Absolutely.
lies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I may share a little nugget, because you just reminded me of that, the whole thing around emotions. I was introduced to a concept to differentiate between feelings and emotions, where in this concept, and as I said, we have to be careful with concepts, but I just take it, as an impulse of feelings are things that I feel in the moment. Yeah, the
Mm.
moment being here with you in this wonderful conversation, this wonderful connection and sharing. And I feel like my horizon is widening while I'm talking to you, and I can then observe all the feelings that I have.
Mm.
And then emotions, where in this context, emotions are like old patterns, like when I get what we call triggered. Yeah. Something happens and then I react out of a pattern or out of a bias or yeah, that this there's a difference where the moment I was introduced to that, when I react strongly, what I would say normally emotionally, then I ask myself, is this a feeling or is this an emotion? Is this, or in other words, is this something that is genuine in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like an old pattern, the way how I have learned to react to something? And I give you an example, this thing around, because you talked about anger. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, for those of us who are familiar with the like golden energy or red energy, it's this whole thing around, I mean, we can't always bathe in mother milk, right? And then always have this golden energy and the sun is shining and everything is beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah. We also go through childhood. No, I want something. Yeah.
Oh
Or
yeah.
no, I want to do it differently. I have my stubborn head and I want to, I want to run against it, or I want to touch that hot pot and I want to burn my hand. I want to learn. Yeah. I want to do it differently. Adolescence, puberty. Yeah. I want to move out. My parents suck. This world sucks. I know it better. I know it differently. And those are experiences that are very important. So red energy, anger, yeah, destruction, yeah, is very important, because without it, you will not have that creative moment. And that circles a bit to our discussion that we had in the beginning. Yeah. It's this cycle, the destruction and death bringing out, birth and new life and new perspectives. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's why, also in ancient Indian wisdom as well, this whole thing around, you have godlike destruction and you have godlike creation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these forces, they're constantly there, and they're part of our human being. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have that moment of tearing down things and recreating. Yeah. If I'm not a slave to it. Yeah. And if I don't inflict pain on others. Yeah.
Mm.
That's very important. So I'm not proclaiming violence. Yeah. That's something else. It's the red energy, it's the red power of wanting to create something new. And I can only do that if I get rid of something old. Yeah. And that's this whole thing with golden energy, red energy, golden
Mm.
saying everything's in harmony, and red is everything is in destructive recreation. Yeah.
It's Shiva. It's
Um,
Shiva. It's destruction. It's taking out obstacles. It's removing toxins what no longer serves.
yes, absolutely. And you can't always do that peacefully. You can't always say like, no, I want all these bad things to leave. Sometimes you need to take action and you need that energy and you need the power to do so. Yeah. And so that's why I say, and then the other example, that's where I was leading to, is like when my kids do something and they trigger something, they don't listen,
Mm.
for instance. Yeah. I call my son like 3 or 4 times, he doesn't react. Yeah.
Mm.
And then I get like, "Ah," yeah. And I think every parent can relate to that. Yeah. This moment where kids don't listen. And then I can sense something happening in me. And I can sense something, or several things, right? One thing is I I'm not being heard. Yeah. So it's my own kid, but my kid in that moment can trigger something that has nothing to do with him. Nothing whatsoever. It's relating to my own childhood of not being heard, not being listened to. And then I get this anger. Yeah. And then what happens? Then I have another pattern coming up. I go like, my dad comes up. And my dad says, you better listen and you have to be on point. So, and then that's how this whole pattern then starts. I have an old emotion that's triggered. Then I have a behavior pattern that's trying to because it's trying to protect me. It's trying to create an environment where I'm being heard and where I have control. Yeah. So, and that's where I'm in. That's where the record is playing. Yeah. And that's where the record is playing. And I go like, okay, wait a second. Then I have to reflect. Go, okay, what's happening here with me? Really? I want my son to hear me. Is there any other way I can do it? And this is not. And please, parents will relate to that. This is not something you can always do. And the moment you have to leave the house and you have only 2 minutes to get to school and you're late already, and your kid is not listening to you, and you don't have the time to get into your yoga moment. Yeah. So you need some action, but there is something going like, wait a second, maybe something else is happening, and maybe I need a different method. Maybe I need to say something in a way that makes them listen up and follow me. And I say, like, oh, by the way, did you think of this? Do you have your, so instead of saying, get ready, get out of the door, I say, have you packed your water bottle? And that will get him thinking. It says, oh no, I did not. And then he'll like pack it and say, okay, are you on your way out the door? And then I create this moment where I don't need to activate, yeah, my old patterns. And then I found a little one, but I found a new little door that opened
Mm,
that is leading me on another path, yeah, away from my
love
old
it.
patterns. Yeah.
Love it, Pascal. And that comes from the ability and your ability to actually observe what is happening in that moment, which, as you were saying, can come very hard, but as we train it, it will be there in the moments where we most need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But again, because you're talking about philosophy, and I'm very adamant about pragmatic or practical philosophy. There's something very pragmatic in everything. Everything I also talk about is, first of all, just be good to yourself. Yeah.
Mm.
That was, of course, I'm leveraging from my own learning. Yeah. Because I know I can be very hard on myself. I can be very unforgiving. And for me, one key moment was to say, wait a second, by all the philosophy, by all the discussions, all the concepts, and all the different approaches and nature religions, and, everybody saying that they know the truth. And, then you have these competing tribes and everything, and then the noise and the wars and everything. Having this moment and saying, am I just good to myself right now? Yeah, nobody's perfect. Yeah. And it's not always about saving the world. You know? It's about being good to yourself, you know? Being forgiving. You know? And it's a lot about self-acceptance. And then a lot of things evolve from there, depending on what I like, you know? What my preferences are. But I think if everybody would have the experience and the inner space of being good and forgiving and accepting, um, I do think the world would look a little bit different. Yeah.
That is
Don't want to come
so.
across too idealistic, but I do believe.
I totally, totally, totally resonate with that. I feel like we have been given, we have been assigned a small piece of the universe to take care of, and it's in our own care. It's in nobody else's care. And while we can have some control on other parts of the universe, it's this part of the universe that we first have to nourish and care for and love. And it's not selfish. It doesn't exclude taking care of others. On the contrary, I have this really, really strong belief that the change you want to see comes from inside. You start with your world. If we want to change the world, we start with the inner world. And I think that you, Pascal, are one of the people who are an example of that, because you've changed your own world through your own internal change, right? And you have changed the world of your family. You've changed the world of your company and your community, and now you're looking to change even more the world, to transform, because this is your word, right? To transform through your own transformation. So it's so relevant, and I feel like there's the temptation to look away from the internal while
Mm.
everything is going crazy, right? But it's even more relevant to go inward while everything is going crazy.
Yes, well, no, I fully agree. So this whole thing around transformation, um, So I have the feeling it's the best thing I can do is to talk and to drive transformation. And
Mm.
I learned early on, there's this Pretmund Malik, professor of economics in the University of St. Gallen, and well, he wrote a lot of books. Now I'm going a little bit into the business part to it, but it still resonates with me personally. It's this whole thing about he started off with this. I'm simplifying a lot around work is not supposed to be fun. Yeah, because a lot of people say, um, like for instance, parents to their kids, do whatever you like. Yeah, do what you think is fun for you. Yeah, and and again, simplified and extract. It's about this concept of not doing what you think is fun, but doing something that is given to you as a talent. Yeah, that you have a talent for, that you're good at. Yeah, and when I discover that, or when just in general, I think it's a general learning, is that the moment we embrace our talents, fully embrace our talents, we become good at doing that, and then with that comes a positive reflection. We have a positive impact on ourselves, on our families, our communities, and that's then where the fun sets in. Yeah, it's the appreciation of it. And we very often misunderstand. That's why you have these talent shows on TV where people go on stage and they think they can sing and they can't sing. And the whole nation watches TV and starts laughing, because people think I should be doing that, what I think is fun. But I can't sing, so I'm not going to go on stage. But there's something else I can do. And I had a transformational coach that helped me also through a phase. And that's also very important, is to ask for help, by the way. I mentioned at the beginning, talking about mentors.
Mentors.
Yeah. And I never stop learning. And I always look for people who mentor me. Even sometimes people mentor me without them knowing that they're mentoring me. And it's not always about age. I learned from a 15-year-old as I can learn from an 85-year-old. It's just different moments, where I go like, oh, that was a learning. That was an impulse. That was something that struck me. But it's this thing with I lost my thread. That's a good one. Yeah, it's about what I can do. This transformational coach, exactly. And what he did was, he had me draw my lifeline. So, and on different levels, my work career, so educational work career, my my own health situation, whatever, hobbies and so forth. And then he made me pinpoint the crisis moments, what we talked about before. And then looking at those crises, these moments of crises, and then saying like, what were the elements or the talents or the capabilities that helped you through those moments of crises? And write them down. Write them down, look at them. And that was mind opening. That was eye opening. That was like, wow, those are my natural talents. Yeah. How did I over, those are different for everybody. But really taking a look at that and going, okay, that's what I'm equipped with. Yeah. I'm going to take a look at those right now. I'm going to strengthen my strengths instead of constantly looking at my weaknesses, and take a look at my talents and see how I can actually leverage them. And that's one of the things that I do is I love talking. I love learning. I love connecting. I love sharing. And I love transforming, looking at things from different perspectives and then seeing what happens. Yeah. And just, not being judgmental, not already having a rigid outlook on the outcome of it, but just to see how this space evolves. Yeah. 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 That's what I like. That's now I like doing. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing. I can't believe we're almost coming close to the end of this conversation.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? And I feel like we could be here for hours. And probably when we meet again, we will talk again for a couple of hours. But now, as we move to maybe the end of this conversation, I feel like there was a lot today, and there was a lot of wisdom and insight that you shared. And I feel like I'd like to close somehow the circle with one thought. And I know this is hard. If you were to share one thought that you feel people can take and take in and use as a resource in times of crisis, what would that be?
Cool. Wow. 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 There's one sentence that crystallizes out, and it says, "You're worth it.
Mm.
Yeah, you're worth it. Your moment is worth it. It is worth being here. It is that space." It's but the sentence again has its challenge, because in moments of crisis, it's hard to be open for that. I mean, how many times have we experienced crisis and the last thing we wanted to hear was some wisecrack with a calendar quote? You And it's sometimes very hard in the moment of the highest vulnerability is to feel an inner stability. You know? It's also hard in a moment where that record is playing to say stop. I want to crack that pattern. You know? It is very hard in the moment of self-flagellating and chastising and self-criticism to say, hey, I I love myself. I love being me. And it's super, super hard to face your own inner demons. Yeah. And I think anybody who tells you differently might not have understood what it means to face a demon. Yeah. Demons can be all consuming. It can be very, I call them my Darth Vaders. Yeah. And a Darth Vader has no other ambition than to rule the galaxy. So demons are very, very powerful. And don't get me wrong, I'm not using the word demon as putting a face on it or creating a magical mystery animal out of it. And I think they express themselves completely different for everybody. It can be a deep depression. It can be a blackout point. It can be a trigger that releases stuck energy from past trauma. It can be a lot of different things. Yeah. And that's why I think it's, you know, I'm the last person to give advice like a blanket advice, a carte blanche, to say how to deal with crises. Yeah. The only thing I can say is each and every one of us is worth it. Yeah. We carry the universe in ourselves. And the universe is huge. So that's, if you would ask me for that, that's what comes up in my thought. Actually, not even my thoughts. I can feel it. It's something that just crystallizes in a way. And yes, I'm a very worldly person. I talk about the universe. the observable universe, 93 billion light years across. We've learned so much about this physical universe. We've looked so far into outer space. It's amazing. At the same time, we very often don't take the time to look into our inner space. And there's a whole universe in that.
I love it, Pascal. I've really felt it. And I could feel it, not just a thought or emotion, but also in my body. And isn't science also spiritual? And isn't spirituality also science? Isn't the great work of physicians, mathematicians so spiritual? Isn't it? Yeah, I feel like it's great to remember that the rational mind and the science and the great discoveries of the universe and the great ways that we are projecting the universe in the future have something spiritual to the base, and they're one and the same. And the universe inside of us is, as you're saying, is worth it. And thank you for saying this bold and brave and empowering thing. Because I think when, as I was saying before, when everything is crumbling, might be counterintuitive to think, oh yeah, I'm worth it, and if I care of myself, if I take good nourishment, and if I love myself, I can better support others. Not that I have to love myself in order to support others, or that the only reason why I'm going to feel worthy or to love myself is to support others, but it's going to be a natural consequence. And the natural consequence will be that I maybe, by caring for my own universe, inner universe, will light up the world a little bit, will shine a bit in the darkness. The greater the darkness, I remember this, my yoga teacher from yoga school was saying, the greater the darkness, the more relevant the light. The greater the darkness, the more relevant the light. And I think you've managed to put this together very well in this sentence. We are worthy and you are worthy. And I feel so blessed in this moment. And I want to thank you deeply with so much gratitude from my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And my gratitude and thanks go back to you and also to this moment. It's been an amazing journey having this conversation. And when you reached out, I knew I definitely want to talk to you. And it's like a gift that the universe has just brought. I mean, we only have a short amount of time on this, what I call the spaceship Earth, this ball of rock that is floating through this galaxy. And this galaxy is only one of maybe 2 trillion other galaxies. I have no idea. And I have this feeling it's like a borrowed time. You know? It's when I take a look at the history of evolution, you know, and the way how we've evolved, and then we just pop up and we have this short amount of time. And when we take a look at this time, we can actually make it feel like forever.
Mm.
And that's a moment that I appreciate, to say, okay, how am I going to embrace that and use that to have experiences like these? Yeah. That's amazing, isn't it?
I love it.
Yeah.
It does feel right now like time has expanded in a way, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Pascal. And I invite everyone to follow you and to follow your work, your amazing work, and also to follow yourself, guys. So follow your heart. And thank you so much, Pascal, for being here to guide others and to show others how they should connect to their inner guide. or how does one connect to their inner guide and then come out transformed? Thank you so much
Thank
for
you very
being
much
here.
for having me. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, Emma. Was a wonderful session, and I commend you on the work that you're doing. And we'll definitely stay in touch. And to the audience watching this, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this conversation. I feel blessed to be able to share this. And I think moments of vulnerability are valuable moments. And yeah, and I think we should embrace them as moments of strength, actually. Yeah. So, in that sense, Emma, thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, everyone.